All right, gang, let's get started. Russ, thank you so much. I feel like I'm in a high-end spa. I'm just right now expecting my massage. So thanks for that move. That was good, though. Thank you, Russ. Appreciate it. Glad you are there. It's always better to have that music playing when we're journaling. So, hey, gang, a quick fun message this morning that I think will be very, very helpful. I want to talk about the idea that real estate is very competitive, which we all know. I believe that real estate is more competitive today than it has ever been, and at least in the 30 years that I've been in the business. And I think anybody who's been in the business for any period of time, at least for a decade or more, can attest to that. That it is much more competitive a business than it ever was. And so our goal, our task, our charge, if we're going to be successful in the business, is to is to separate ourselves from the competition. We have to, because the clients, the buyers and sellers in the marketplace have, in most cases, depending upon the market you're in, thousands of choices. They have thousands of agents to choose from, and so we have to do a great job of separating ourselves from the crowd. And there are a couple of ways that you can do that. You can do it through discounts, through reducing your commission, and in a buyer's market, tell the seller whatever they want to hear relative to price. That's not so much an issue in a market like this where inventories are so low that you can come up with a crazy price and the market supports it. But historically, agents will discount their commissions and tell the seller anything they want to hear about price just to get a listing. Well, that's certainly an option. You can do that. I don't recommend it. It's not a long-term, sound, stable business plan, but agents do that. The other is to really build value. It's to offer value. And how do you do that ultimately? Well, I believe that the cornerstone of value in real estate is the way in which you communicate, the message that you share. And so I just want you to think about that in terms of the message that you share, and how effective is it, as you are talking to buyers and sellers, the message that you are sharing, is it causing people to more often choose you versus the competition? Kathleen Bruno and I were talking about this yesterday in our coaching call. She said, John, that a lot of coaches out there, a lot of companies will say that if you can convert 50% of your listing appointments to a signed contract, that they consider that a good ratio. And she said, obviously you and I don't. And I said, yeah, not even close. It should be much higher than that. I mean, we want a minimum of at least 80% if you're a top producer. And we were talking about her percentage, and we track this. She's getting 98% of her listing appointments. When she goes out, she's getting contract signed 98% of the time. And she closed on 87 transactions last year. Well, how is that possible? Well, it's possible because Kathleen builds a lot of value in her presentation. She separates herself very, very effectively, excuse me, from the competition, from the other agents that the sellers are interviewing, or the buyers that she's talking to. So I want to just chat with you for the few minutes that we have this morning about the importance of creating a message that builds value, that separates yourself from the competition. We see it all the time. Truck manufacturers do this. You'll see the Ford ads, the Chevy ads, the Dodge ads, and how they're competing against one another. And they share a message about their vehicles. It's Ford tough, and they talk about its payload capacity and how much it can tow, and all the features and benefits. And those messages, what I call sound bites, usually something that's no more than 5 to 30 seconds, are quick bursts of information that give people perspective on the product so that they can discern whether they're interested in the product or not. So one of the things that I would suggest is that you're using sound bites in your prospecting conversations, but also in your listing presentation or listing conversation and your buyer broker conversation. So I just wanted to go through a few suggestions on those and help you maybe create some sound bites so that as you're prospecting or and you're out presenting to people, that you actually have some sound bites and that you use them, because these are great opportunities to give people perspective on who you are, what you do, or what your company does, and then also separates you from the competition so that it's easier for them to discern why they should choose you versus the competition. Because left to their own devices and what other agents do, the only thing that they have to judge you by is going to be the commission that you're charging. What is your value? So let's talk about that. For example, if you're working with buyers or you're trying to convert somebody into, getting off the fence and deciding to do something in today's market, because a lot of buyers are skittish. They've been pushed to the sidelines because of the low inventory and how difficult it is to get a home. And we all get that. It's frustrating. But let's just talk about the fact that interest rates are increasing and the importance of the urgency for buyers to get into the marketplace before the interest rates go up any higher. So one of the things that I would do in a conversation with a potential buyer or a buyer that I'm working with right now who seems to not be highly motivated or seems to have expectations that are not in alignment in terms of features, benefits, and price that are not in alignment with what's going on in the marketplace, I want to have a conversation about interest rates. So I would say something like this: if I were in a conversation either prospecting and talking to a potential buyer or working with one of my clients who's seemingly slow or reluctant to move forward on making an offer on a property that I found them. So I would say, Bob and Mary, it's interesting. Historically, interest rates are somewhere around, on average, about 8%. And right now we're seeing interest rates at 3%. So they're like 5% below what they are historically. But here, let me just share this with you. A 1% increase in interest rates equates to a 10% increase in the price of a home. Now think about that. If interest rates go up by 1% over the next year, which a lot of experts are expecting that interest rates could go up by as much as 0.5% to 1%, that means that the home is basically costing you 10% more. So if you're spending $700,000 on a home, it's going to cost you $70,000 more. So doesn't it make sense to move forward right now and actually make an offer on this home? So that would be a soundbite that I would use. And now that one was probably more like 45 seconds, but a very effective way of giving people perspective in terms of what's happening in the buyer's arena when it comes to the cost of money. Another thing that I could do to give them some perspective is this. If they're reluctant to actually make an offer on a property and they're slow to do something, I would say, Bob and Mary, I don't know if you know this, but across the nation, we saw home prices increase anywhere from the high single digits to as much as 30%. And experts are predicting this year that on average, home prices will increase by 11% in 2022, which means if you're purchasing a home of $700,000, it could cost you as much as $70,000 more the longer we wait in this market. So having said that, doesn't it make sense to move forward now and make an offer on this property, or to begin our search now so that we can get the home at a lower price? So two effective sound bites that you can use in having a conversation with buyers who may be reluctant to actually making an offer or getting engaged in the market and looking for any properties. Gang, as I'm going through this, I'm going to pause just to give you a chance to ask me any questions or thoughts. So before we move on to sellers, just any questions or thoughts? We got a lot of people on the call, so let's make certain we're having a conversation. Anyone?
Hey, John, good morning. It's Armani.
Good morning. Good morning, Armani.
So I think one of the things that that is happening right now, obviously there is very low inventory. Right now I'm actually at the San Paulo office and we have we have one coming soon and no actives. Everything's either contingent or pending. Mm-hmm. So in those scenarios, based on what you just said, as far as trying to convince a buyer to proceed, how do we tackle something like that right now, knowing that it's going to be a tough time? And I always like to be forefront with them and
Absolutely.
give them a reality of what it is. But how do you? I don't know. I don't even know what to say, really. I mean, you just tell them the truth, or do you
Well,
I mean,
you do have to set their expectations, right? Because if you don't set
yeah,
their expectations, they're going to find out anyway, and then they're going to be disappointed, going to be frustrated, and guess who they're going to be disappointed and frustrated with?
yes, yeah,
You, right?
me,
So
yep,
you've got to talk about the challenges of the market, but at the same time, you've got to present to them that you do have some solutions. I mean, one of the first things is making certain that they get completely qualified. So the Everest Advantage through Inspiro, they should be doing that. Every
yeah,
buyer that
good,
you're working with should do that, because that gives them a competitive advantage in the marketplace. You talk about escalation clauses in offers, and using the tools within the contract that we can use to our advantage to give them a competitive advantage when they're competing against other buyers. Vicente, let's see, you said something here and I read it and I completely forgot it. So let's see what it was. Oh, do not say there is no inventory. Instead, say we haven't listed yet. I like that as well. The truth is, and that is such an important point, there is inventory. It's just that it's our job to go out and find it. I work with a couple of agents in the Santa Clarita office, Armani, and the Ramoses, Andy and Stephanie. And they closed on nearly 50 homes this last year in 2021, more than they ever have. And a good half of those were buyers. They were very effective at getting people to sign buyer broker agreements and to find the property and make offers and get them accepted and get them closed. And it's because they were great at, one of the things that we worked on that I coached them on is make certain you're setting expectations and telling them, this is the nature of the market. Inventory is low. There's not a lot out there. So therefore, we have to do certain things in order to lead us to the point of actually getting a home under contract and closing on it. And the language that we use is very important. We can talk about, that the homes aren't on the market yet. And what I mean by that, to Vicente's point, is that I go out and knock on doors and I find the inventory before it's put on the marketplace. That's one of the things that I do. The other thing that I do is that we're going to make certain that you're qualified through the Everest Advantage, so that when you actually find a property, we don't have to go through the process of getting you qualified. All we have to do is get the property qualified by simply getting it appraised. And that's going to be very appealing to sellers. So we've got to set expectations and make certain then we're following a protocol that we know is proven to give us a competitive advantage when it comes to separating ourselves from the other buyers in the marketplace. Okay, does that make sense? Armani?
yes, it does. I was
cool.
trying to unmute myself. Yeah, no,
Okay,
I just
all good.
The obstacle obviously is we're all aware of it, and I just wanted to bring up the topic because there's so many of us that we don't know what to say. We don't know. So this is really helpful. Really, thank you.
Well, you bet. And there are more things that we could talk about in terms of addressing that particular issue with buyers. The earnest money deposit, the amount that they're willing to put down. The buyer being willing to give their highest and best offer right in the beginning, rather than saying, well, let's try this. And if that doesn't work, then we might be willing to go up. Those sorts of things don't work in today's marketplace. So we've got to be really clear about these are the things that you have to do in order to separate yourself from the competition. So that's a great question. All right.
Hey, John,
let's move on. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I find that when I tell them what you had just said is that they are reading other sources, and I tell them that the National Association of Realtors, there's no data to support what it's hard to say you're looking at the wrong source.
Well, rather than say to them, because I don't want to make them wrong with it, because that's excuse me, it's a good point. What I will say is that what you're reading is a source that talks about what's happening broadly on a national level, and each market is different. And because I'm a very active agent in our marketplace, I know exactly what's going on in our area and what we need to do in order for you to be competitive and actually get a home in this market, as opposed to what's happening in Tampa, Florida, or Dallas, Texas, or Muskogee.
Right. Yeah, they're mostly waiting for it to come down. We're waiting for the market to crash.
Mm-hmm. Well, right. And we can have a conversation about that. I mean, I normally say, well, my heavens, if you know something about that, please share that with me, because I don't have a crystal ball. Share with me where you heard that the market was going to crash. Okay. I want to have a conversation about that. I want to, in a very positive way, in a productive way, I want to call them on that that statement or what could very well be nonsense. I don't know that it's nonsense. I don't know that it's not nonsense because I don't have a crystal ball, but I want to know where they're hearing that, because none of the reputable sources or experts are saying the market is going to crash. What they're all saying right now is that the market's going to increase over the next 12 months. Right?
Okay, so have them explain to you, like, what are you hearing? Where are you getting that from?
That's interesting. I haven't heard that yet. Where did you happen to hear that? Oh, we heard a friend of mine said that. You know, he's a real estate expert. Oh, okay, all right. And then we can have a conversation about it. I mean, ultimately, you can't tell them they can't have the perspective that they have, the opinion that they have. All you can do is give them a greater perspective in hopes that they might change their perspective and their opinion, so that you can help them get ultimately what it is that they want, which is a home, because they do ultimately want a home.
Right.
They just may not. They just may not have the right plan to get that home. In most cases, they don't.
Yeah.
And it's our job to get them to follow us. Yeah, you bet. Okay, so let's talk about sellers. In listing conversations at the kitchen table, or if you're prospecting and trying to set the appointment, you can use various sound bites. One of the best sound bites you can use, whether you're brand new in the business or a vet who's been in the business for decades, is to talk about the track record of your company. So one of the things that I might say to a potential seller, I might say, Bob, one of the reasons that you should choose me is because my company last year sold 7,000 homes. In the last 12 months, my company sold 7,000 homes. So my question for you is, how many homes do you need to sell? And I'll usually smile if I'm face to face, and they'll look at me and kind of smile, and we'll chuckle, and they'll say, well, just one. And then I would respond by saying, well, my heavens, if we can sell 7,000 homes in 12 months, there's no doubt we can sell one. And then if it's over the phone, then I would just simply say, and that's the very reason we need to get together. So what would work best for you, a morning or an afternoon or an evening? So that would be a soundbite that I could use, leveraging the production of the company of 7,000 homes in the last 12 months. And it was, to give you an exact number, I can't gang, but it was like 6,994. So it was basically 7,000 homes in the last 12 months that Everest, as an enterprise between Utah and California, sold. The other thing that you could look at is your own personal track record. You know, if you're selling, for example, 8 homes a year or 12 homes a year, let's just say you're selling 8 homes a year. If you're selling 8 homes a year, what that means is that, if my math is correct, you're selling about a home every 45 days. So what I would say to a potential seller is, I would say, Lynn, the exciting thing about working with me is that I sell a home every 45 days. So when you list your home with me, on average, I'm going to have it sold in 45 days. That's a very simple, very quick soundbite. Rather than focusing on, well, there are some agents who do 50 sales a year, and my heavens, I only have, emphasize on only. Agents will say, well, I only did 8 transactions last year. No, you didn't only do 8 transactions last year. You sold a home every 45 days. So the way in which you present that information obviously affects the way in which the message is perceived and the way they perceive you. And the fact is, if you're selling a home every 45 days, that's a pretty significant accomplishment. So share that information with them in a positive, succinct way in that soundbite. Another way to do it is to look at not your personal record, but take a look at the brand, Century 21. One of the sound bites that I like to use, that I recommend using, is the fact that Century 21 is a company that's been in business for over 50 years. And it's the most recognized brand in the world. So what I would say is something like this. I'd say, Armani, it's so interesting. Without question, the reason that I believe that you should be choosing me and Century 21 is because Century 21 has been in the business of selling real estate for over 50 years. In fact, Century 21 is the most recognized brand for real estate in the entire world. That's been proven by independent research. So if you want to work with a brand that's well known, where people have absolute sense of safety and security, there's no brand better than Century 21. Another soundbite that you could use relative to Century 21 would be this one. Lynn, the reason that you should choose to work with me in Century 21 is that Century 21 has an army of salespeople, of agents around the world, over 140,000 agents worldwide who have access to the Century 21 website that shows all the inventory. Now you might say, well, why does that matter to me that there are 140,000 agents worldwide? Well, the reason for that is because a lot of people, today's world is very mobile. And so people are moving from all around the world, including China, to the United States, including to California. The number one foreign buyer in Southern California are Chinese buyers. And the fact is that Century 21 has over 1,000 offices in China. So if you want to make certain that your home is exposed massively to buyers, not just in the local market, but on an international level, then you should choose me in Century 21. So again, leveraging the reputation of the brand. Another aspect of Century 21 is that it has 14,000 offices around the world. So I would just the same sort of a message. I would say, Vicente, the reason that you should choose to work with me is because I'm part of an organization, a company, a brand that has 14,000 offices around the world. 14,000. I mean, there are companies in our marketplace that have one office. And you might say, well, what does it make a difference whether they have one office or 14,000? Well, it speaks to the fact that the power of the sales force and the marketing that's done. Imagine the amount of marketing that's done by 14,000 agents, part of an organization that's been in business for over 50 years. You can't compete with that. A company that spends tens of millions of dollars a year in advertising the brand and the product. And isn't that what you want, is massive exposure of your property? Because the more exposure you get, the more interest you get, and the more interest there is in your property, the higher the price that you get for your home. So that's the very reason we need to work together. So those are some great brand specific sound bites that you can use, gang. Look, the last thing that I would say is this: create basically what I call an earn the right statement, a sound bite that's specific to you based upon your expertise, your production, your affiliation with the brand, whatever it is, a succinct, generally speaking, a 30-second commercial basically that talks about why they should work with you versus the competition. See, one of the things that I often said when I was out competing in the marketplace, I would say, Lynn, the reason that you should choose to work with me is because 96% of my business comes from my past clients. Now, why is that important? Well, what that speaks to is the level of customer service that I provide and the fact that they feel absolutely comfortable and confident of referring their friends, family members, and even their coworkers to me. Their reputation is on the line, and yet they're referring people to me. And I guess the question is, why would they do that? Of course, the answer is because they've had a great experience in actually getting their home sold. So you can use various aspects of your personal record, of the company's track record, or of the brand to soundbite sell to separate yourself from the competition. But gang, at the end of the day, you have to separate yourself from the competition. And if you're not doing that through your message, the only way by which they're going to separate you from the competition is the commission that you say you're going to charge them. And if you're not discounting your commission, you're going up against agents who will. There's a very high chance they're just going to simply work with the other agents, and you miss out on the opportunity to take a 6% listing and get them to choose you, despite the fact that you're asking a commission that's higher than the discount agents in your local market. So any thoughts, any questions before we wrap this up, because we are over time?
John, it's Louis. Can I share a thought?
Please.
So right now, as you're sharing that, I just like to remind everyone why it's so important to pre-qualify 100% of the time. Because one of the questions in there is, what specifically are you looking for an agent, right? When making a decision like hire someone like myself. Right. That will give you an idea already. Therefore, when you're having that conversation, it'll set the tone of the conversation and you'll know which sound bites to use. Absolutely. It's what I always say, Louis, to that, excuse me, which is take the open book test. You want to know the answers to the questions. And when you ask that, what are you expecting? What are you looking for in an agent? And they tell you, now you know what you need to focus on, as opposed to guessing and just taking the shotgun approach. So that's a great point. Exactly. All right. Any other thoughts or comments? You bet. Thank you. All right, gang. Well, then let's finish this up with some closing.